Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. Have you ever considered a career as a paid speaker? Even if you have, would you know the process by which we go about getting onto the circuit? What are the absolute do's and don'ts in the speaking industry? Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Bret Ridgway, founder of Speaker Fulfilment Services and a prominent speaking industry consultant. He's also an 8-time author. I'm sure he's working on more, a marketeer, obviously a speaker, and the host of the Spotlight on Speaking show. So if you want to have a listen, download now. A man that can assist you to make your paid speaking aspirations a reality. If you don't believe me, then let me run by some of these incredible names. Russell Brunson, Shetty, John Assaraf, Jordan Belfort, Stu McLaren, Dean Graziosi, and Joe Polish, to name but a few people who have worked with Bret. So today I want to learn how the paid speaking industry really works and discover how to avoid mistakes that can be avoided. So without further ado, I welcome Bret onto the podcast. Hi, Bret.
Hello, Dave. Excited to be with you here this afternoon. Hopefully we can share some good tidbits that will help the aspiring speaker out.
I'm certainly hoping to hear some fantastic information from you. It's an area that I'm very interested in myself, so I hope you're going to educate me and the listeners to an enormous extent today.
It depends on how trainable you are, Dave.
Well, I'm getting a little bit old, but you never know. There's a few tricks in me yet. You never know. So let's start off. How did you find yourself on this particular journey? And what was it about you and the fulfillment services that managed to attract so many of the big name speakers I just shared, with the audience, to you?
You know, it's one of those stories, Dave, where you can definitely trace back specific things that happened that in your wildest dreams, you never would imagine that you ended up where you end up at doing things. But way back in the mid-1990s, so going back almost 30 years, I actually put up the first portal website in the plant engineering and maintenance industry. So back in those days, it was VHS tapes and books, but aimed at plant engineers, maintenance mechanics, electricians, that type of folk. And about the same time frame, I also had a joint venture with a guy, a well-known marketer here in the States, a guy named Carl Galletti. And I took over his old hard-to-find marketing book catalog and put that up online. So you're talking about the old classics like Caples and Hopkins and things like that. So I was selling both marketing books online as well as the plant engineering and maintenance website. And so back in the mid-90s, I was doing product fulfillment and I had to figure out all those processes that were involved in that. Well, because of that joint venture that I had with Carl on the marketing books catalog, when he decided to do his first internet marketing conference in 1999, he called me up and asked me if I'd handle the back sales table for him. Well, honestly, Dave, I didn't even know what backroom sales meant, but I hadn't been to Las Vegas before, so it sounded good to me. I said, sure, I'm on board. I'll do that. And so that kind of led to a side business where over the course of the next 15 years, I managed to back the room at about 150 different internet and information marketing conferences. So, the event promoters would find out about our services and I would provide the crew. And in most cases, more importantly, the merchant account that could handle a large sum of money in a short period of time. And so we just take care of all the sales. We pay the promoter, we pay the speaker, and just keep track of all that back of the room. And so because of that, I was getting to know a lot of the speakers in person. And around 2002, 2003, one of them cornered me at an event. And it was actually at another one of Carl's events and said, hey, Brett, I know you're doing some product fulfillment. Will you do fulfillment for me? And I'd been thinking about it for a while because it was a natural outgrowth of all the people I had gotten to know in the industry. So if you name a big name internet marketer, I probably know them personally and certainly have done work for a lot of them. And so because of that impetus in the early 2000s, I founded a company called Speaker Fulfilment Services with another guy that provides product duplication and fulfillment services for speakers, authors, and information marketers. Now, the industry has changed dramatically since then, certainly, because back in the day, David, it was all about the big box package, man, the thump value. How many DVDs and CDs and manuals could you pack in a course and send to somebody? Well, info products has certainly gone on a diet since then. But because of both the back of the room experience, I probably saw about, 2,000 different speakers in person over the course of that 15-year period. And as well as handling the product fulfillment for some of those big names, I was able to see what they do well, what they don't do so well. And so what I'm focusing my efforts on these days is helping people that want to get into the speaking industry understand what they really need to do to make that happen. Because there are a lot of mistakes I've seen made that would curl your toes, honestly. And there are things that would be killers to a new speaker. And so, I was honestly happy being the backroom guy for many years. I mean, that was my shtick, so to speak, or whatever. And I'm kind of a naturally introverted guy. But eventually I said, Brett, you really need to get up on that stage yourself and get over this shyness or whatever and share some of what you have learned along the way. And so, roughly 8-10 years or years ago, I did start getting up on the platform myself. Now, I was never a platform seller, we'll call it. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit, Dave. But I was the content guy. So if you go to a multi-speaker event, typically it's a lot of people who talk and then they make a pitch for some type of product or service. And so to prevent the audience from getting pitch after pitch after pitch after pitch, they would bring a guy like me in to deliver just straight content, no offer, no pitch, whatever. It's just, let me train you on something or that will help you out or whatever. And so it is one of the things I got more comfortable with over time. And, I'm starting to venture into the other areas of speaking, so to speak. But that's, kind of the circuitous route, so to speak, that, led me to where I am in today. Now, actually about 6 months ago or so, I actually formally parted ways with the fulfillment company that I founded, and they're still doing their thing or whatever. But I'm focusing my energies on helping people get into the speaking industry. So that's where we're at.
Brilliant. That's really interesting. Certainly an interesting story and an incredible number, an array of people that you've clearly had dealings with in the past. And, what better way to learn than in front of some of these incredible ladies and guys. Now, you mentioned content there, and obviously social media is full of content, people pumping out content left, right, and center. The question is, though, how do you turn that content perhaps into a speaking gig? Standing up in front of a huge audience is one thing. You can have 10,000, 100,000 followers on social media and never show your face. So obviously I'm very keen to understand those people who have generated so much information. They've really helped their audience incredibly. They want to go into speaking. So let's think of some of the rules. What are the recommendations, that you can, share now that would increase, that value and deliverability?
Sure. So, keep first and foremost in your mind that the purpose of any social media posting that you're doing in terms of content is designed or should be designed to drive them from social media to your own website. So you're going to try to get them to come to your site where you're going to offer some type of incentive. Some people call it an ethical bribe. Some people call it a lead magnet, whatever name you call it. It's an attempt to get them to trade their email address for whatever content it is that you're offering on your own website. And so that you can get them on your list to then start nurturing them and continue to feed them content directly, not just hoping they'll find you on social media. And then hopefully they'll get into, some of your paid products and services at some point in time. But it's not an overnight thing. It takes time to nurture and build that particular type of thing. One of the key things that I think most people don't realize, David, when you think about speaking, in my mind, there are three primary types of speakers. One is what you would call your keynote presenter. So they're paid the fee by the corporation or the association to come in and deliver a talk or a training. Could be a 1-hour talk, could be a half-day training, whatever it may be. But, you're going to agree on some type of fee up front, and you're going to, they're going to cover expenses typically and all that stuff and bring you in to do that. The second type of speaker in my mind is a world that I primarily came out of, and that's the platform selling world. So multi-speaker event, typically is 3 or 4 days long, focused around a particular topic. Could be internet marketing, info marketing, could be a woo topic, energy healing, whatever it may be. And so the presenters are going to deliver their content and then make a pitch or an offer at the end for some type of ongoing training, continuing education, or whatever it may be. Could be a membership site, could be one-on-one coaching, could be group coaching, could be a mastermind program, could be a master class. I mean, it could be, anything. It's really only limited by your own creativity, but they're typically speaking for free. So they're not paid a fee by the event promoter. They coming in on their own nickel, and, it's on them to sell successfully from the platform in order to, monetize that particular speaking engagement. The third type of speaker in my mind, honestly, is something that everybody should be if they're a business person. That's what I just call the business builder speaker. So they're going to go and speak to the local Rotary or Kiwanis or Chamber of Commerce or whoever it may be and share content with the hope that when the people have the need for whatever it is that they offer, it could be a chiropractor, an attorney, an electrician, whatever it may be, they're sharing some helpful advice. And then when the person in that crowd has a need for that particular type of service, well, they're the one that will come to mind because they've shared value with that particular audience. So they're not directly selling from the platform. It's more of an indirect sale type thing. But again, anyone, in my opinion, should be a business builder speaker because, would you rather speak one-to-many or one-to-one type thing? And so it's something that certainly everybody should do. Now, not everybody should look at building a speaking business because it's a business and there's systems and processes and assets and you got to run it as a business. You can't run it as a hobby if you're going to have any kind of success. But the first thing that you have to decide if you're thinking about becoming a speaker is what type of speaker do I want to become? Is it just about business building? Do I want to be a platform seller? Do I want to be a keynote presenter? And there's pluses and minuses to each approach. And only you can decide what's right for you. I mean, keynote speakers can be very lucrative, but it's kind of a hard nut to crack. I mean, many people have heard in the States it's called the National Speakers Association, or in Canada it's called the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and they're fantastic groups and all that. But here's an interesting fact, Dave. I was actually on a website of a speakers bureau recently, and most people probably heard of speaker bureaus, but they're organizations that will represent speakers to organizations. So if a company or an association is looking for a speaker on a particular topic, they'll go to the Speakers Bureau and say, who do you have on this particular topic that we can bring in? And the Speaker Bureau will make recommendations. Well, I mean, typically they are going to represent and push their high ticket speakers. So the people that have that, $10 or $20 or $25,000 or $50,000 fee, because the Speaker Bureau is going to take 25 to 30% of whatever speaking fee you're given as their fee for hooking you up with that end client. So I was on a website of a Speaker Bureau recently, and they touted that they had vetted like 16,000 different speakers. Well, when you look through the website, they had like 300 or 400 listed at the most. So you had like a less than a 3% chance that you would even be featured on their website, even though you had been vetted by them. So when you're getting started in the speaking business, it's going to be hard to make it really successful as a keynote until you get those higher fees and you have a proven track record. Now, whether you're a keynoter or whether you're a platform seller, the key thing to succeed in this industry is the word relationships. It's all about the people that you know and the people that know you and like you and trust you. And you've got to nurture those relationships. It takes time. I mean, it just doesn't happen. You have to go into it with a, what can I do for you viewpoint versus what can they do for me viewpoint, because people will see right through that. And if they see that you're just in it for you and you're not really interested in helping them in any way, then you're not going to get the results that you want. But I was honestly able to, with the help of a great team, obviously, build up Speaker Fulfilment Services to a multi-million-dollar corporation entirely off of relationships. It was the people I met at events that became clients and that were great referral partners for new clients. And no money was spent on proactive advertising. I wasn't running Google ads. I wasn't, placing classified ads or anything like that. It was all about relationships. So you got to nurture those relationships, and it takes time to build those relationships. A few years ago, I actually had a book that came out called Mistakes Authors Make. And we went out on the limb. We decided we were going to launch this live at an event and try to drive it to a #1 status on Amazon. Well, so it was going to either be a massive egg on your face or a success or whatever. But because of the relationships that I had, there was more than enough people that were willing to step up and help out at that promotion date. And that book did become a #1 bestseller on Amazon as a result of relationships. So nurture those relationships carefully. There's an old book by a guy named Bob Burke called Endless Referrals. And, a little bit of it's dated, but it's still a great book. I just reread it. And, you've got to truly systematize how you're going to nurture relationships. I'm a big believer in handwritten note cards, so get some note cards made up with your logo on them or whatever. So when you're a podcast guest or somebody's been on your podcast or done something for you or whatever, write them a little thank you note. People notice that. People will remember you because you've taken that extra step that 99% of people will never take. So, keyword of the day is relationships, certainly. So we were talking about keynote speakers, platform sellers, as I mentioned, Dave. Typically, you're going to go to an event on your own nickel. Now, in most cases in the platform selling world, the split is 50-50 between the event promoter and the speaker. So if you sell a product for $1,000, you're going to get to keep $500, and the event promoter is going to get $500. And typically the event promoter will absorb the credit card fees, but it's up to you to absorb any cost associated with the delivery of your product. So if it's a hard product or whatever, that's on you. Now, most people these days offer digital products for obvious reasons, but I think it's a mistake, honestly, to dive into the digital-only pond because, again, if you can be front and center in the brain and have some offline touches with them, like I mentioned, the note cards, but if you can remain front and center in their brain by, sticking something in the mail to them once in a while. I mean, I have a colleague, a guy named Armin Moore, a well-known internet marketer, who is, the majority of his delivery is online because it's about internet marketing, which is a fit or whatever. But once a month, he sends a physical magazine to his members with articles, about internet marketing and things that will help them out. But it's a reminder of the value that he's bringing into their world. So he's not just, hoping that they find him online because, how many things have you downloaded, Dave, on your computer and it's like, forgot about it, never looked at it again, out of sight, out of mind. So, I think you got to get offline too. Now I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I'm on a roll here, man. So don't.
Yeah, you've come out with a lot of good things there, though. Just do a little reflection. The three types of speaker. Obviously, for those people who are not going down this as perhaps as their main gig, so to speak, then there's those people who need to speak in their career, which can be quite daunting. I'm sure there's lots of lessons they can take for their career progression, which in turn obviously makes them earn a bit more money. And I love the fact that you're talking about networking here and doing networking properly. It's about how, what you can do for them rather than what they can do for you. And obviously the keyword relationships. And you're trying to make it a more of a personal relationship. It's not just dropping an email here and there, which could be sent to 1,000 people. It's an individual email. Just because the name at the top says, to Dave or Fred or Brett or whatever, that doesn't make it personal. But by sending something, as you mentioned in the post to people, means you've actually thought of the individual, not just a list of people that happens to be on your computer and it's time to, send something out. So I think some fantastic things for people to reflect on there, which are really quite golden nuggets, should we say.
So rolling back into the three speaking models or whatever. So we were talking about platform sellers and the 50-50 split and all that. So a common question that I get, Dave, is, well, should I be a keynote speaker or a platform seller and all that? And again, you can only decide what's right for you. But I will tell you that if you can master the art of effectively selling from the platform, you will make far more money as a platform seller than you ever will as a keynote presenter. I have a colleague, the aforementioned Armin Moran, that does the monthly magazine, who spoke at an event in the UK a few years ago. And in one 90-minute presentation, he did $995,000 worth of sales.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, I think he was selling a $5,000 product, so it was a high-ticket item. But he was like, damn, I would have bought one myself, just to get to the $1 million mark or whatever. But even after his 50-50 split with the event promoter, for one 90-minute presentation, he walked away with $500,000. Now, I'm certainly not going to profess that that's the norm in any way and promise to anybody that they can achieve that. But it just, it kind of goes to show you, under the right circumstances, what can happen. I mean, obviously, he had the right topic with the right audience at the right time, and it hit a massive home run. So if you can get comfortable selling from the stage, yes, if you're looking at building a speaking business, you will make more money selling from the platform than as a keynoter. Now, I do have some colleagues that have mastered the best of both worlds, which is wonderful. And so when you're going into any speaking engagement, you've got to find out what the parameters are for that engagement. Are you going to be allowed to sell? Or are you not going to be allowed to sell? Can you just sell a book or give away a book or have a drawing? What can you do to capture names of the people in the audience if you're not allowed to sell? I mean, that's going to be up to the event promoter. I mean, one of the things that they really frown on is people that come in and just try to what they call harvest their list. So they spend all the money to get the butts in the seats or whatever. And then you have a speaker that comes in and say, well, just text me your number to such and such and I'll send you the whatever. And they're not really intending to make an offer. They're just trying to grab the names or whatever. Well, promoters don't like that very well, honestly. I mean, what they really like is speakers that are proven, that they know can sell effectively from the stage and are going to deliver great content to that audience. And your responsibility, first and foremost, is to deliver great content to that audience. I mean, it should be a seamless transition from the content portion of a presentation to the sales portion of a presentation. And I am certainly not going to profess, Dave, that I have mastered that craft myself. I mean, it takes time and effort, and you will get more comfortable with things over time, but it doesn't happen overnight. And keeping in mind also that event promoters want people that are typically selling higher ticket items. They don't want people selling, a $47 package from the stage or whatever, because there's not a lot of money in it for them under that scenario. So they want people selling that $1,000 ticket price or that $2,000 or $5,000, where if they're successful from the stage, then that's going to put some money into the event promoter's pocket too. So, it's a small world, and believe me that event promoters talk, they know who does well and who doesn't do well from the platform. And getting on the stages initially is going to be what we already talked about, Dave, relationships. You've got to attend events and be seen. I was recently asked to speak at the Nonfiction Writers Conference in May, which is a virtual summit, supposedly thousands of attendees or whatever. We'll find out or whatever, and we'll talk about something related to that in a little bit. But it was all about relationships. I mean, because there are a lot of wonderful networking opportunities out there for new speakers that you need to take advantage of. Now, you can't do them all. You got to pick and choose your battles like anything in life. But, there's a group called Speakers Playhouse that every Thursday they do a 90-minute high-powered, networking event where everybody gets the opportunity to, for a few seconds, talk about what their signature talk is about. What are they looking for? Summits, live events to be on. What are they offering? And then vice versa. There's also hosts on there talking about their stages and what kind of speakers they're looking for. So it's networking. It's being seen. And you need to attend them as often as you can. Now, again, you got to pick and choose your battles, because if you spend all day networking, then you're not spending any time doing anything else to build your business. So, but Speakers Playhouse is just one. The OC Speakers Group does a regular monthly event. Speaker Connections does a regular event. There's JV groups out there called like JV Jams and JV Directory that you can get out and network with people and find possible joint venture partners. So when you're looking to launch a new product or training or whatever, you can get some people to help promote that. So, I mean, if you just Google, networking speaking events or whatever, you'll find plenty to choose from, and you got to be seen. And I honestly think that you need to be seen at virtual summits, even if you're not a speaker there, because, they always do the gallery mode where you can see all the people there, and people will see you, and you get a chance to probably enter in the chat what you're all about and all that stuff. And you just got to work it. You got to nurture. But eventually that will lead to people approaching you about being on their platforms and all that. I'm supposed to speak at an in-person event out on Long Island in June or July. It was all about a guy I met on a podcast, and led to a relationship that, he wants me to come out and speak at his event. So, you just can't emphasize enough how important the relationship part of this business is.
Yeah. So, you must be reading my thoughts here, because I've got a number of things written down, and finding and selecting the right gigs was one of the next things I was going to talk about. But it sounds like you cannot approach this with a kind of scattergun approach. You need to have a strategy behind you. As you said, you've got to determine what kind of speaker are you. Then you've got to determine what are these events all about? What can you offer? Then you've got to build a relationship with those individual promoters, find your niche, so to speak. There's a lot to think about here. You just can't just put your name in the hat, can you?
No, there's a lot of pieces to put in place, honestly. And, you got to think about building a building. You got to put it in place a brick at a time. So it is easy to get overwhelmed sometimes, but you just got to remember, all right, what am I going to do today to advance my cause forward? So even though you're building a business, so many people get tied down into, doing the work of the business and not doing anything to build the business. And I'm sure you've talked with people about that on your show, you Michael Gerber and the E-Myth and all that, a well-known business book or whatever. But if you spend all your time doing the thing or whatever it is, you're an auto mechanic and you're working on the cars all day, well, you're not doing anything marketing-wise to build the business. So you've definitely got to carve out some time every day to say, all right, what am I going to do from a marketing standpoint to build my speaking business? Whether it's sending out a few thank you cards to people to further relationships, send out an email, do another podcast episode, whatever it may be. You've got to have focused time on marketing and keep rolling that wheel forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategic thinking going on here. One question I've got, if it's possible to know, does it matter who else is going to be on the stage?
Oh, entirely. Let me tell you a sad story, Dave. No, it's sad for one of the speakers. Let's put it that way. So I was at an event a few years ago, and it was a multi-speaker event in the internet marketing space. And for whatever reason, the event promoter was all about getting as many big names on the stage as possible. So there was no thought given to developing a curriculum or some type of event flow that made sense for the attendees. It was all about getting the names. Well, as it turned out, there were 3 separate speakers all on the subject of copywriting. Now, while copywriting is a very important subject, by the time they got to the 3rd speaker on that same topic, the audience was like, oh, been there, heard that, tuned out. So that person's chance of selling anything from the platform was like, 0, because people were burned out on the subject of copywriting. So clearly that speaker didn't do their homework ahead of time to find out who else was on that platform. What are they talking about? What's their price point going to be if they're making an offer? Do I speak before or after them? I mean, these are all homework questions that you've got to do in advance of an event to determine if a stage is the right stage for you. Very importantly, who's in the audience? What are the demographics of that audience? Are they men, women? Have they likely heard me speak before? What's their educational level? I mean, there are, dozens of demographic related questions that you could ask. And it's up to you, and it's not always easy, but it's up to you to find out as much as you can about that audience to determine if it's the right stage for you. If this copyright speaker had found out he was going to be the 3rd speaker on the subject, maybe he could have come up with a different topic, because you need to have more than one speech in your pocket, so to speak. But he could come up with a different topic or whatever that maybe would have resonated with the audience better. But you've got to build rapport with that audience, and you've got to do that homework ahead of time to determine how you can best craft your presentation to match whatever the pain points of that audience are. Are they there to learn about pay-per-click ads or copywriting? Or if it's a corporation, what is their pain point that they're paying you to come in as a keynoter to address for their corporation? So what are you going to do in advance to find out what those pain points are? I mean, so many speakers are just so damn lazy, Dave, that they're not willing to take the time to do the homework to figure out how they can best deliver that presentation to truly address the needs of the audience. Now, I think you need to have a core speech, your signature talk, so to speak, but it needs to be flexible. I mean, what stories are you going to leave out, or teaching points are you going to leave out if it ends up you only have 45 minutes instead of 60? Or what are you going to add in terms of interactive activities or whatever? If they say, no, you got to go for 2 hours instead of 1 hour or whatever. Or no, this is a half-day training. What are you talking about, a 90-minute speech? So you got to have all these modules that you can subtract or add as necessary to your core talk to fill in whatever time the event promoter is expecting you to fill. But, demographics is critically important. And, one of those things that most people don't understand, honestly, is the concept of buying units. And if you're in a platform selling situation, it's critical that you, as best you can, determine what the number of buying units are at an event. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the number of attendees is one thing. But if you are in a crowd where both the husband and wife are attending together or whatever, well, that's one buying unit. They're not going to both buy your product or service. I was handling the back room at an event in the homeschool market a few years ago, and it was down in northern Alabama, if I remember. And there was about 100 people, 110 people in the crowd or whatever. And it had one speaker who was so excited because it was the biggest audience that he'd ever got to speak to in person or whatever. But when all was said and done, with husbands and wives and even kids that they brought along or whatever, there was maybe 15 to 20 buying units in the crowd. So his, chance of getting massive sales was way less than he expected, because the number of buying units was way less than, was a concept he didn't understand, obviously. So that's part of doing your homework.
Yeah, that's some fantastic things you pulled out there. I'm a bit curious now. Seems to be should be a lot of alignment. Now, do event organizers ever get all the speakers kind of together, maybe not physically, but virtually, to make sure they're all singing off the same song sheet? They're all aligned. They've all agreed what they're going to focus on, so they don't clash with each other. So they actually make the event the best possible event for the people that are going there.
I haven't seen a lot of that, honestly, Dave, in terms of formally doing it, like you mentioned. And I do know that the good event promoters do give careful thought to who they're bringing to the platform and how it will all fit together and make sense. It can't be just about grabbing the names, because when you're just grabbing the names, you're going in with the thought, well, they're going to help me promote the event, and they'll bring people, put butts in the seats and all that for me. Well, by and large, I'm going to tell you, that ain't going to happen. So, you may get them to send an email or do a social media post, but to think that they're going to actively promote to their list your event, not really going to happen so much. So, it can't be about the names. It's got to be about figuring out what's going to deliver the best value to the attendees there. Now, I've seen event promoters bring in big names because they thought it would help draw additional people to the event. And I've seen it succeed somewhat, and I've also seen it fail miserably. So, you got to think long and hard about whether you're willing to pay somebody, $50,000 or whatever it is to come in and be your headliner, thinking that they're going to, help draw people to the event. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. You just got to be very careful with it.
Yeah. Now, for somebody who's quite new to this game, perhaps they've done a number of free gigs. They feel they've done fairly well. Perhaps they're starting to build a little momentum with, with event organizers. Their relationships are, becoming more prolific. How do they determine when's the time that they should start asking for a fee, and what size of fee should that be?
Well, the first word of advice I would have is do some research online, like go to the National Speakers Association website. On there, they list their members and they list what their speaking fee is and what their area of expertise and all that. So, get a feel for what the marketplace is doing in terms of your particular topic and all that. Now, you don't want to be the cheap speaker. I mean, I'll tell you that because when event promoters or a corporation or association look at speakers and they see that they're only $2,000 or $5,000, they must not be very good or whatever. And so they'll pass on you because you're too cheap, too inexpensive or whatever. So I think you need to be mid to upper range or whatever initially in terms of the pricing in your particular niche, and then step up over time. It depends on what your topic is as to what that dollar starting figure is going to be. I mean, you have in the industry what we call hard topics and soft topics. And, a hard topic is typically going to be anything how to make money. Could be real estate, Forex, internet marketing, whatever it may be. And typically, if you're selling from the platform, and you're not going to get a lot of keynote type opportunities in the how-to market, really. I mean, it's mainly going to be feel-good stuff like, motivation, personal development, et cetera, that are going to be the keynote type topics or whatever. But if you're in a platform selling situation and you have a how-to topic, which we, again, call a hard topic, typically that's going to command a higher price point, but it's also going to have typically a higher return rate, than a soft topic. A soft topic is anything like relationships, personal growth, energy healing, any of the woo stuff, they call it or whatever. Typically, those won't command as high of a price point, but they also typically, are going to have a high rate of return or whatever. Now, I could tell you stories, Dave, where I have seen people that I would consider to be woo-woo speakers, get up there and wow the crowd and get them all excited and in the moment or whatever, and then they offer some type of ongoing coaching or whatever. But I've seen that type of speaker after that initial euphoria wore off from, sitting in the live event, had like 70% return rate because people realized there just wasn't any real content there, and that the momentum wore off or the euphoria wore off or whatever you want to call it. And so it didn't stick or whatever. I mean, you got to think about anytime you're selling from the platform or online even, what are you going to do to help keep those sales to stick? Could be bonus items that people weren't expecting. Your follow-up series in terms of emails should not only be emails aren't only a sales tool, they're a great consumption tool. So what are you going to do to drive people back into your product, into your coaching, whatever, to continue to consume your information? Because it's all about consumption. I mean, if you're selling a book and you can't get them to even read your damn book, well, the chance of them coming back to you for some other type of product or service that you may offer, goes way, way down. So you got to continue to ongoing nurture in terms of even existing clients and do things that will help them to stick. I mean, they say the average stick rate of a membership type site is, 6 to 8 months or whatever. Well, what are you doing to tease them about the content that's coming up or whatever, so they want to hang around longer? Hey, I got a great interview with so-and-so next month that you're going to definitely want to listen to, or I've got a surprise bonus for you or whatever. Again, we talked about offline touches being important. That's where offline can come into play. You got a lot of people doing what we call swag kits these days, Dave, so they'll send their members, T-shirt, coffee mug, whatever, or journal, pen or whatever to keep in front of them, an unexpected bonus type thing. So, thinking about what you can do to make any type of sale stick when you're selling from the platform or selling online is really something that people need to give a lot of thought to as to what they're going to do to make those sales stick.
Yes, that's some brilliant advice there. Now, you've talked about loads of do's. We've touched on a few don'ts and a few mistakes. Now, you've seen a number of howlers, possibly, shall we say. So can you share with us some of the real big howlers? Do not do this, and do not, kind of avoid this kind of mistake. What can you share today?
Sure. So was handling the back of the room in an event about, God, this is going back 10, 12 years or more. But the speaker had the dream of every speaker occur, the true table rush. I mean, people were literally at the back sales table throwing their credit cards at us saying, I want it, I want it, I want it. After all was said and done, the speaker had generated $375,000 worth of sales. Well, fantastic. You say, I would love to have that. Well, what wasn't quite so fantastic was less than 30 days later, every single penny of $375,000 had to be refunded to the attendees. Because what they had sold from the stage was a website development tool, some type of software product. And for whatever reason, it had some type of bug in it that they could never figure out. So every single penny had to go back. Not only was it a major embarrassment for the speaker, and it was a major heartache or headache for the event promoter because they just lost out on their $182,000 cut of the sales or whatever. But, the speaker had already been paid money, so they had to get money back from the speaker in order to refund the attendees. And honestly, David, didn't help my pocketbook any because we take a cut of the promoter's share for handling the back of the room. But so the lesson there, honestly, is if you're going to sell anything from the stage, in my opinion, don't sell something that's not fully developed and tested. Now, had another event a few years after that where the speaker was selling some type of training that was going to be done in a couple weeks or whatever. And it wasn't $375,000 for the sales, but it was like $40,000, nothing to sneeze at or whatever. Well, as it turned out, invariably 2 weeks more development time turned into 3, turned into 4, turned into 6. And again, every penny had to go back to the attendees because they couldn't deliver on the timelines that had been promised. Now, there's an exception to this rule, I think, of not selling something that's not fully developed. And if you're planning to do like a ongoing webinar series or whatever, where you're developing the content live in order to create a product, that's fine or whatever. But if you're selling a software product or some type of training that you're promising a hard delivery date on, well, you better be damn sure you can meet that date and that your software is bug free, because I can't afford to give $375,000 back to people. I don't know who can. So,
my goodness.
So let me tell you another one, Dave. So
yeah, sure, go for it.
So we were handling the product launch a few years ago for a client in the Forex market, and they had done very well. We'd had handled several product launches for them before. So it was an information product, CDs and DVDs and some manuals and stuff. And they opened up their cart one morning and sales started to come in looking great or whatever. And then about 3 hours in, boom, their shopping cart got shut off. Their merchant account got shut down. Well, their merchant account got shut down because they had simply not picked up the telephone and called the merchant account provider and say, hey, I'm doing a new product launch. So most people don't realize that when you set up a merchant account, you're going to define an average ticket price and an expected monthly sales volume. And when you suddenly have a massive spike that they weren't expecting, well, that's a major red flag to them that, oh, this is possible fraud. We're going to shut this down to protect ourselves or whatever. So boom, they lost out on lots of sales. Based on their previous launches that we had handled for them, they lost out on $300,000 to $400,000 worth of sales simply because they hadn't picked up the phone and called their merchant account provider and let them know what was going on. A simple phone call would have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad that's not my money. What can I say? Oh, blimey. Right now, before I ask my final question, you have shared an enormous, you are on fire today, Bret. So thank you very much for everything you've shared. It's awesome. Now, I'm sure you've got some things you're also very excited about. Have you got a new book coming out? Have you got a new masterclass to share? What can you really get the excited audience to jump onto today?
Yeah, I'm really excited about a couple things, Dave, and thank you for asking. So my new book called How to Build a Profitable Speaking Business is just out now. So I actually got the first case in yesterday. And so if you are interested in learning a little bit more about some of those do's and don'ts and mistakes that I've talked about that can kill you as a speaker or whatever, then you can get that at bretridgway.com/books. And my other 7 books that I've written are listed there also. But that's the brand new one, hot off the presses, so to speak. And then I am, in fact, crafting a new masterclass. It'll be an 8-week course called Spotlight Speaker Masterclass. And it'll be going through the step-by-step process of building a speaking business. How are you going to craft that signature talk? How do you deal with event promoters? How are you going to monetize that speech? Are you going to be a keynoter or are you going to be a platform seller? what type of products can you sell on the back end? Because the real money as a speaker is what you can sell from the platform typically. And so we'll help people craft whatever those back end products or services should be, as well as talk about all the things that you need to have in place, like your media kit and your website and your sizzle reel and all the things that you need to build over time. Again, it doesn't happen in a day or a week or whatever, but you continue to build those pieces. And so if you go to the consulting tab at BretRidgway.com, you can find out more about that upcoming masterclass.
Brilliant. Now, I'm sure you've got lots of other social media handles. Is there any that you want to share today? Facebook, Instagram, what's there?
Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn are all just linkedin.com/n Bret Ridgway. So my name, Bret with one T, Ridgway without an E. Bret Ridgway is the handle on all those, and it's just B Ridgway on Twitter. But I try to post regularly on those 4 platforms. So
Brilliant. Well, I'll make sure all those are shared in the show notes for people to click away when they get to that. So, but my last question, because I see the time is surging ahead now. Now, we've talked about other people's mistakes. Obviously, you're a guy now who's very prominent. You've seen it all, probably done it all. So I'm curious, what do you feel is the biggest mistake that you've made, and what can others learn from that mistake?
Oh, that's a great question, Dave. So, I had to think on this one for a little bit, but I think the biggest mistake that I made is not doing what I'm doing now 10 years ago, not having the courage to step up and put myself out there. I mean, the speaking I did in the past was always on behalf of the fulfillment company. So it was never about branding Bret Ridgway and putting myself front and center. So while I did have the gumption to get up on the stage some myself, I was still, in a sense, hiding behind the skirt of the fulfillment company, in a sense. And so the things that I've learned along the way, I should have been doing what I'm doing now, honestly, years ago. But for whatever reason, I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the gumption to get out there and do it. So my parting advice to people would be, just do it. Don't be afraid to get out there and start putting those pieces into place that you need. If you truly feel like you have a message that you need to share with the world. I mean, how many of us, Dave, have sat in an audience at an event and said, man, that should be me up on the stage sharing my story. I've got things to share that would help people out. And sometimes they may be looking at people like me and say, well, I'm a hell of a lot better speaker than that guy or whatever. But the bottom line is, don't be afraid to do it. Start putting those pieces in place, whether it's research or whatever. But you got to get going. Don't be the one who's still sitting here 5 years from now thinking, man, I wish I had done that. I wish I'd done that. Get started now.
Brilliant. That's some superb advice. As I said, Bret, you really blown me away with the amount of value, the information, such great tips, everything. It's been absolutely jam-packed today. An awesome podcast. Lots of gratitude from me. Thank you very much. People should go and listen to your podcast. If there's anything like we've had today, then they're going to be blown away. So thanks ever so much, Bret.
My pleasure, Dave. Enjoyed being here.
Take care, mate. So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.